Everyone, and welcome to the last webinar of the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria for the year 2022. Sincerely, we want to appreciate everybody for being part of our programs. You've really made the year a wonderful one. We appreciate your time, your efforts, and the engagement during our webinar session. I am Dr. Yasiri Oluwaseun. I'm the coordinator of the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria and the host for today's meeting. I am a senior lecturer at the Department of Animal Physiology, Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Nigeria, and currently a George Foster Research Fellow at the Humboldt University in Berlin, Germany. So today we have Mr. Opemipo Alaba Ijose, who will be presenting on conservation of pangolins in Nigeria, the challenges and the possible solutions. His presentation will be the 14th in the year 2022. And the moderator for today's meeting is Dr. Bukola Oyebanji, Fafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. So please, I want you to, be part of us today to enjoy the webinar. We'll be happy to have your questions in the chat box, and further comments can be taken at the end of the meeting if you have any comment for the presenter. So with that, I would like to hand over to the moderator to help us with today's meeting. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yasiri. It's a pleasure to be here again. I'm from Obafemi Awolowo University, and I'm a member of the Association for Animal Welfare in Nigeria. And today we are going to have Mr. Ijose, Opemipo Alaba Ijose. When I heard the title, Conservation of Pangolins, initially I thought, what's pangolin? Are they some bird? What exactly are they? So I had to go online to go and see what pangolins are. So I'm really interested, and I'm sure all of us here are interested, because this is something that is not so common. It is not the animals we are already used to. So Mr. Ijose is a trained wildlife and sustainable tourism scientist whose research areas revolve around illegal wildlife trade, rational utilization of natural resources for community development, and ecotourism management. He's a committed advocate for pangolin conservation in Nigeria, and currently is a graduate student and a teaching assistant at the University of North Texas, USA. So I welcome you, Mr. Ijose. He's going to tell us about pangolin and the work he has been doing, and I'm sure it's going to be really interesting. So please, any question that we have for him, let's put it in the chat so that we can take it immediately after his presentation. Mr. Ijose, you are welcome.
Thank you. Good day, everybody, wherever you are joining from. Just like the moderator said, my name is Opemipo Alaba Ijose, and I'm presenting on the topic, conservation of pangolins in Nigeria, challenges and possible solutions. To start with, we really have to delve into what pangolin is. For those who don't know, pangolin are scaly mammals. They actually have scales all around their body, and except for their belly, which sometimes actually distinguish between what a black-bellied pangolin is and a white-bellied pangolin is. Pangolins, they feed on termites, ants. And what actually motivated my interest, or what captivated my interest towards wanting to know more, or towards liking pangolins, is the fact that they are defenseless, and human being happens to be one of the major threats that they have. You may be wondering, what's so special about pangolins? Well, pangolins also serve several ecosystem services, because they help to keep the population of ants in check, population of termites in check, for the fact that they feed on them. So the distribution of, before I go further into the distribution of pangolins in Nigeria, I would like to talk about, briefly talk about the various species which we have. In Africa, we have 4 species notably, and we have 2 which are actually resident to Nigeria, majorly resident to Nigeria. The white-bellied pangolin, a geographical range cut across the western part of Africa, and towards midway into the southern part of Africa. You can see them around Benin, Central African Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, and even Nigeria. The IUCN status, as we speak, is actually vulnerable. And if care is not taken, it might graduate to the level of being critically threatened. Also, the black belly pangolin. Well, you may be asking, why black belly, why white belly pangolin? Well, the black belly pangolin, if you look at the morphology, if you look at the body, you discover that it actually has black scales, unlike the white belly pangolins, that the scales are actually white. Also, the black belly pangolin has an IUCN status of endangered. That is, the rate at which the animal is being persecuted, that specific species being persecuted, is also on the increase. And if nothing is being done in the nearest future, we might be losing these animals. White belly pangolin is arboreal, that is, they stay on tree most of the times. They get the hands which they feed on around trees. They move around tree branches in search of ants and termites. And also the geographical range of black belly pangolin cut across West African countries, Central African countries, such as Liberia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and so on and so forth. Well, let's go straight into the problems which are actually associated with pangolin conservation in Nigeria. First and foremost, I want to highlight the issue of perception. People's perception about pangolins, or people's perception about wildlife resources generally in the country. Well, you will agree with me that in Nigeria today, most people believe that wildlife is a natural gift from God. We know it's a natural gift of God. And as a result, people think whatever it is you get from God cannot actually run, out of supply. And that's quite a big issue we are facing. Whatever it is that we found on the surface of the earth, most especially natural resources, history has been able to inform us that things can actually go out of supply if they are not properly managed. And that's the more reason why we should look into ways of which we can actually manage pangolins in Nigeria. So many people believe if you go to rural areas, for instance, if you go to Ogun State where we have some species of pangolins, if you go to Ondo State, if you go to Lagos State, and you meet with wet marketers over there, you meet with hunters, in fact, you meet with people generally and ask them about wildlife in general, they'll tell you that wildlife can never cease occurring. But then, if you look at the trend, you discover that if you're moving down from Osun State, you get to Ashejire, what we used to have in terms of the supply of wildlife along that road has actually reduced compared to what it used to be 10 years ago. So the perception people have about the conservation of animals, wildlife, the perception people have about the supply of animals is actually wrong. And this is one issue that is affecting the conservation of wildlife in Nigeria. Because if you don't believe you can actually run out of supply, then you don't think there is anything, you don't think anything should be done to actually manage such a animal. And also, the second issue, which I would like to talk about, is the issue of habitat fragmentation. Habitat fragmentation, that is altering the formation of the ecosystem. This can actually occur as a result of agricultural practices. People want to feed. There is poverty in the land and people want to feed. So the need for people to actually feed necessitates the need to create more agricultural land where people can actually cultivate their crops and they can be able to feed. And then we forget the fact that this agricultural land, this derived area, are actually sourced out from, ecosystem that serves as habitat for some of these animals, which pangolin is part of. And as a result, when you start destroying the ecosystem, when you start cultivating the ecosystem for the purpose of agriculture, what are you doing in the real sense? You are destroying the habitat of pangolins, and they find nowhere to go. This would tend to make them to move very, very far away. And in some cases, agricultural activities exposes the house, the habitat of these animals to poachers. By the time you were able to cultivate the forest, you make what's it called? You make movement trace whereby people can actually go about their activities in the forest. You destroy the trees which serve as habitat for these animals. What happens in the real sense? You are telling the animals that they are no longer welcome here and they should find another place to go. And in some cases, those other places are not even, are not even conducive for them to be able to carry out their normal, life activities. The animals cannot even dwell in those places that they have been, pushed to go. So what happens in the real sense? Some of them tend to die. Some of them tend to not be able to reproduce because they do not have access to the amount of resources which should sustain their livelihood. Also, deforestation can also cause habitat fragmentation by the time, which I think I've actually mentioned under agricultural activities. You cut trees down. Tree serves as home for pangolins. Tree serves as home for prey of pangolins. That is the hand. By the time you cut them down, what happens? The animals find no other place to stay, and they are being pre-exposed to hunters and to poachers. So these are major issues that are actually affecting the conservation of pangolins in Nigeria. And then lastly, I will talk about the economic value and the local trade. There is an high demand for pangolin specimens all over the world, most especially in the Asian continent. People on the increase are requesting for pangolin derivatives. For instance, the scales. Well, some people might want to say the scale is actually very prominent or very useful when it comes to what's it called, producing traditional medicine. Some will tell you that the skin is actually very good for making pepper soup. Some will tell you that the animal is so nutritious, you know. These are issues that are actually compounding or probably bringing, challenges that are affecting pangolins in Nigeria. These are the forms of uses which pangolins have been subjected to in Nigeria. For instance, you can see the first one says their aesthetic essence, that is, pangolins have been decimated, pangolins have been killed, pangolins have been poached, pangolins have been persecuted, just because people need their skins to be able to make bags, to be able to make clothes, to be able to make whatever it is for fashion. And these are irrelevancies. And also for tradomedicine, just like I said, some people still believe in this part of the world that the scales of pangolin, which contains the same what's it called, the same thing as our fingernails, that is keratin. Some people still believe that can actually suffice or heal them. For instance, some people will tell you that when you mix it with other stuff to be able to make tradomedicine, it can actually heal romanticism. It can actually, some are even saying it can actually cure cancer. And this has not been proven scientifically. And also, for bushmeat purposes, people are increasingly poaching pangolin in the wild for the sake of bushmeat pepper soup purposes. And I tend to ask myself, I'm so sorry. I would have to apologize to people who are animals advocates here. But then we have a whole lot of sources of protein that we can actually, resort to if we want to supplement, our protein intake, other than, resorting to killing animals that we know that their population, if care is not taken, can go out of extinction. Can go to extinction. So those are some of the uses which pangolin are actually subjected to. And if you look at it, these are things that we can, provide alternatives to. There are always alternatives. There are always alternatives that can actually serve the purpose which people are selfishly subjecting pangolins to. So there is a whole lot that needs to be done in that regard. And also, we want to talk briefly about the international trade of pangolins. If you look at the chart in front of you, you discover that the bodies of pangolins, it's been on the increase of trade. as of 2007, you know, and when you look at the amount of body which is actually traded in 2007, it's over 40% of the total derivative or the total substances of pangolins that have been traded all over the world. Also, the live species of pangolins that were traded all over the world is over 80% in 2017. And if you look closely into 2018, you will discover that the bodies and the live, what's it called, animals or live pangolins that have been traded dropped a little bit, and skills begin to skyrocket. The trade of skills began to skyrocket. In 2008, you discover that we have less body quantity being traded, and we have more skills being traded. This to tell you that people still believe. People are so arrogant that they believe that these skills serve a purpose. And that's the more reason why people are still poaching pangolins today in Nigeria. Let me share with you my little experience, which I had over there in one of the wet market I visited. It is quite shameful that when I got to the wet market, I saw some, international tourists who came around to actually buy these pangolins, and they are heavily guided by the police. They are heavily guided by the police. And I was like wondering, is it that this police doesn't know what is actually obtainable or the consequences or the implication of what these international individuals are doing in the market? You understand? So, we are having issues. There are a whole lot of issues that are actually compounding or probably, associated with pangolin conservation in Nigeria. So this thing, we really have to face it. We really have to face it. And also sources of pangolin skills. Nigeria is actually notable for sources of pangolin skills in the entire world. From 2015, Nigeria actually contributed to almost 20% skills of pangolin, source of pangolin skills in the entire world. And in 2018, it graduated to almost 60%. So the situation is not being curbed. We talked about it every day, but then is it being curbed? No, nothing is being done. We have other countries like Cameroon who are also doing the same thing. We have countries like Ghana, and we have countries like Democratic Republic of Congo. But then Nigerian case is always on the increase, is always on the high side, and we should actually see to how we can address this issue. Live pangolin scale shipment in Nigeria. If you look at the projection from 2015, you will discover that live pangolin scale shipped has increased tremendously, has skyrocketed in Nigeria. Up to 2019, it graduated from 2% in 2015 to almost 51% in 2019. So people are in mass excessively removing pangolins from the wild on daily basis in Nigeria. And that's to tell you that the sustainability of pangolins in Nigeria is actually terrifying, it's terrifying. We are not doing anything to actually see how we can address this situation. And a whole lot needs to be done. If as of 2019, we still have live shipments of pangolins, skyrocketing to the extent of 51% of what it used to be at about 2% in 2015, then it tells us that there are issues on ground that we really need to address. So trend of pangolin season in Nigeria as of 2019, in January in 2019, over 1.4 tons of pangolin scales was actually seized in Nigeria. In January also, and in March also, 8.3 tons of pangolin scales, pangolin scissors, pangolin derivatives were actually seized in Nigeria. And to talk of where it's actually going, it left Nigeria and it was seized in Vietnam. This was got these derivatives, the pangolin derivatives, the pangolin scales, the pangolin flesh, the skins. They were actually, they were reported to have been taken away from Nigeria. And until when it get to Vietnam, until when it got to Singapore, was when it was actually arrested, was when they were actually seized. So that tells us that, in Nigeria, even at our custom, even at the level of customs, Even at our borders, nobody even pay attention to if you have pangolin specimens on you, nobody will even question you. Nobody will even ask you, oh, what's the implication of what you are holding? So a lot has to be done. We are having serious issues about these things. And it boils down to the issue of awareness. Do people really know what pangolin is? Most people don't know. As of December, we have up to 1.7 tons of pangolin scales derivatives still moved away from Nigeria and were intercepted in Vietnam. Demand, let's briefly talk about the demand and expected destination for pangolin scales and derivatives. Well, the demand is on the increase, just like I said, and China is actually implicated as one of those countries who are demanding for pangolin scales, pangolin derivatives in Nigeria. And we have Laopedia. They are also one of the major countries that are actually in high demand of pangolin derivatives in Nigeria. And we have Vietnam, which is actually a notable country, which is interested in the demand of pangolins in Nigeria. Well, we've talked about the issues. We've talked about the problems. We've talked about the fact that pangolin is actually being faced with trade, incessant trade, irrational exploitation for aesthetic purposes and all that. Then we should look for ways to actually address this situation. But before we can actually look for ways to address the situation affecting pangolin conservation in Nigeria, let's talk about the awareness generally. Well, in a study carried out by Suewu and Ayodele in 2009, it was ascertained that the awareness of wildlife conservation law was low. There are pre-existing wildlife conservation laws, but they are not being revised. People don't even get to know about them. We don't talk about it. Even in schools, do we even talk about it? We rarely talk about it. Over 90% were uninformed from the study carried out by Ayodele and Suewu in 2009. Over 90% of the individuals that were sampled for the purpose of the research were uninformed about laws prohibiting the hunting of pangolins. I don't even know if they know of any law prohibiting the hunting of wildlife generally. You know, people just believe wildlife, well, they are gifts. We can as well use it for whatever it is that we want. But that is quite wrong. And that's why we find ourselves where we are today. Majority had no idea about the threat facing pangolin species. If you don't know what the species is, if you don't know what an animal is, how do you know what challenges the animal is actually facing? So we surely need to create awareness among people, in respect to the species of animal called pangolin. And when they talked about if people will be willing to actually participate in projects that will better conserve the population of pangolins in Nigeria, 10% only showed interest. You know, the other 90% were interested in actually still, using pangolins as pepper soup, using pangolins for whatever purposes that they want. And this is sad. This is quite sad. So, well, I was able to see that, and I brought about few approach that I think can actually suffice the problems challenging the conservation of pangolins in Nigeria. And first and foremost, we actually need this. We actually need all stakeholders, should work hand in hand to conduct a survey to determine the sizes of isolated population of pangolins across the ranges in Nigerian ecosystem. Yes, just like I said, we don't have information about the whereabouts of these animals. It is until when we know where these animals are, that is when we know what challenges they are facing right within the context where they are operating. We don't even know if they are harboring Akure Ofosun Forest Reserve. We don't know if probably they are in Odo National Park. We don't even know if they are at Omo Forest Reserve. You understand? So it is until when we know where these animals are naturally found, that is when we can actually, provide, ways to conserve these animals where they are readily found. That is how we can actually tell hunters that are operating around that environment that, look, this is the issue. We would appreciate if we can actually see it from this point of view. That is, if we can actually, foster effort with us to be able to conserve this animal. Also, there is need to quantify the number of pangolins sold and utilized within a specific time frame. in Nigeria for all identified uses? Well, we have wet markets located all around Nigerian region. All regions that you have in Nigeria, you have wet market, spread across this area. But then on daily basis, we shy away from the fact that what is been happening over there are actually illegal. In a sane country where we have laws, where we have conservation stakeholders, and we still have wet market operating freely without no restriction, that's to tell us that we still have a long way to go. So from the wet market, if we really want to get started with the issue of addressing problems associated with pangolins in Nigeria, we need to get data from this wet market. We need to know the amount of pangolins that are coming into this wet market on a daily basis. We need to know the amount of pangolins that are getting out of this market on a daily basis. We need to know who is actually responsible for bringing these animals into the wet market, who is responsible, for obtaining these animals whenever it gets to the wet market. Why are they selling it? How much are they selling it? These are things we actually need to know. By the time we have an information about these things, we will know how to trash out, how to address the issue facing its conservation. Then the twin approach of increasing the yield and reducing demand for pangolin should be adopted. What is the twin approach? Well, how can we actually increase pangolin yield? Well, we can do it in situ wise, and we can also do it ex situ wise. In situ wise means we can manage pangolins within the geographical area where they are naturally found. And how can we actually go about that? We can do that by establishing pangolin sanctuaries. Yeah, it is very possible. If we can have sanctuaries for ungulates, if we can have sanctuary for carnivorous animals, definitely we can also have pangolin sanctuary. It's all about trying as much as possible to bring together resources that can suffice, the survival of this animal. We're talking about the food preference. We're talking about habitat suitability. Everything we really have to factor it together. And by the time we bring them together, we will be able to, to establish a wonderful sanctuary that can sustain the survival of this animal, forever, if possible. Then also the need to actually involve host communities in conservation activities through incentives. Well, most of these forests that harbors pangolins population are surrounded by communities. They are surrounded by local people. And the best way to actually manage these animals, to manage this species of animal, is to work hand in hand with the local communities. They see it as their resources, because most of these forests are not actually protected, to be sincere. And then they see the places where these animals are found as their rightful land, their forefathers' land. So they have every right to take whatever it is they want to take from those forests. It is our responsibility as scientists, it is our responsibility as stakeholders to be able to work hand in hand. We should be able to move closer to them and to tell them the reasons why the animals actually matter. They don't know, aside the fact that they should subject it for bushmeat purposes. They don't know, aside the fact that they should actually kill, hunt pangolins and sell it so that they can be able to get money to fend for themselves. You can blame them. It's level of education. They don't know. So it is high time for us to actually work with these people. We should be able to provide, incentives for them, to take their attention away from hunting pangolin. Then we can also encourage them to act as pangolins soldiers, pangolins advocates. They have their community surrounding this forest. They know who comes into this community. They know who goes out from this, who comes into this forest and who goes out of the forest. Whenever they see strange faces, whenever they see strange hunters coming into the forest, we should be able to work with them so that they can provide us with the information. If we know these individuals from the information getting from the local people, we may be able to trace them to where they are taking pangolin specimens and derivatives too. So the contribution of the host community actually goes a long way to provide us with information on how to also conserve these animals, this pangolin species. And ex situ wise, how can we actually increase pangolin yield ex situ wise? Well, we can establish semi-captive breeding facility for pangolins. Kudos to what Greenfinger Sanctuary is actually doing over there in Lagos State. I've been there and I see the good work they've been doing. They've actually successfully rescued pangolin from wet markets. They've actually successfully rehabilitated pangolin on several cases. I was there, I saw it happening. They were able to successfully formulate feed for pangolin. They were able to successfully treat pangolin. They were able to successfully relocate pangolins into a protected ecosystem. But what happens to the pangolin at the end of the day when they release them into the protected ecosystem? What do you think happens to the pangolin? We still need further investigation to, to check if at the end of the day, after we must have actually treated them, we must have rehabilitated them, we must have reintroduced them. We need, further study to ascertain their survival at the end of the day. We need further study to know, okay, what we've actually introduced into the wild, are they actually doing well? Are they actually surviving? So that's an aspect which we actually also need to look into for us to be able to holistically conserve pangolin. Then conveying conservation education. Conservation education is not just meant for the local people alone. If you look at people who are actually buying pangolins for purposes, for bushmeat purposes, I bet it with you, they're not even the local people. Local people only hunt and they sell. So if we can, convey conservation education to the general public, definitely it will bring down the level of demand. People living in the city will stop demanding for pangolin. And when the demand stops, what happens to the supply? It will reduce. So that's one thing we also need to do. Then research, just like I mentioned earlier on, we need to know where these pangolins are. We need to, know much about their habitat, suitability. We need to know about their feeding, ecology. All those things, contribute to how we can actually successfully conserve pangolin, ex situ wise, away from the natural habitat. Then the reintroduction purpose. By the time we are successful with the semi-captive breeding facilities of pangolin, then from there, we can start reintroducing. We can start reintroducing pangolins to protected ecosystems. And not just reintroducing alone, we should try as much as possible to look for a way to guard those protected forests or any other forest that we are introducing these animals into. And with that, on a sustainable basis, I bet it with you that pangolins will stand test of time. From our own little contribution to ascertain the successful conservation of pangolins in Nigeria, I made a little donation of some equipment that can be used by Wildlife Department and some wildlife scholars in Nigeria to be able to look into issues affecting affecting pangolin species. And some of those equipment are camera traps, binoculars, GPS, and so on and so forth. We all have a role to play. We shouldn't just leave it to the government. We shouldn't just leave it to the law enforcement agency. We shouldn't just leave it to the researchers. We shouldn't just leave it even to the the hunters and the traders. We all have a role to play. So whatever it is that we can actually do to help suffice the situation, I believe all stakeholders involved should try as much as possible to do that. And at the end of the day, we'll have more pangolins in our ecosystem. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Opemipo Alaba Ijose.
You're welcome.
Sincerely, I'm hearing about pangolin really for the first time. And we have some questions here, but I want to ask the first question, and that is, what's the Yoruba name for pangolin?
Akika or Aka.
Aka.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some people.
So when the Yoruba say that, "Onti you be aka," this is what they are talking about.
Very shy.
I've heard about it, but I'm saying it for the first time.
Yeah, very shy.
Okay, okay. So I'm going to read out the questions.
Okay.
And the first one says, how can hunters be discouraged from hunting pangolins? So maybe I should read it and you answer then, or do I read everything and you answer together?
No, I think taking it one after the other will be okay.
Okay. So how can hunters be discouraged from hunting pangolins?
Well, it's not an easy job to actually discourage the hunters from hunting pangolins, because this is what they've been doing for years. You know, this is what they have been introduced to by their forefathers. So it's like a way of life for them, and it's a means of survival for them. So if we really need to do what is expected of us to discourage them, then we need to provide what I call alternative livelihood, you know, and it has to be sustainable. The alternative livelihood has to be sustainable. You know, it has to commensurate with the amount of profit or probably income they've been generating from trading pangolin specimens. So it's a whole lot of issues. It's a whole lot of issues. The alternative livelihood, for instance, you can provide what's it called, business. You know, business that can actually generate income on daily basis. For the hunters, you can introduce them to a lot of business like that, and green business this time around, not just a sustainable business, green business. You know, and with time, you know, they take their eyes from hunting pangolins and they embrace new life, and life moves on.
The next question is, I would like to know more about the natural behavior of pangolins. What is their reproductive capacity?
Well, pangolins, actually, the gestation period, I think should be around, if not 150 days or thereabout, and they don't really reproduce that much, you know, they are not really that prolific when it comes to reproduction. The reproduction actually, you know, what informs the reproduction in most cases is the amount of resources which they actually, you know, exposed to. The resources is abundant, which is typical of every wildlife anyways. If the resources is abundant, then definitely, you know, you have more pups out there.
Okay. So what do you foresee as the fate of pangolins in the next 50 years in Africa?
Well, with the way things are actually going, we must commend the effort of researchers. I think researchers are the one actually doing the great job here, and some NGOs who are working tirelessly to ensure that people get to know about the species of animals. So I believe in the nearest future, we see a situation whereby pangolin will move from what it is at the moment, that is critically endangered, you know, to probably, you know, lesser affected animals, considering the level of information being put out there for people to know. You know, these are animals which the only threat which they are facing are just human beings. They don't have any other threat facing their survival other than human beings. You know, so if we can talk to ourselves, we are the enemies here. If we can talk to ourselves, then we see an upward projection in the population of pangolin in the nearest future.
Thank you. And are there any studies to explore their welfare priorities and if they produce sound when they are communicating with each other?
I think there are some international studies. I've come across some research works like that, but not done locally here. We don't really have the tool to carry out such research here in the country. So, but I believe in Asia, scientists have actually gone far ahead a little bit to look into those areas you mentioned. So definitely they make calls, and it has been ascertained through research, but not locally here.
Now, I think you have answered okay, let me see. What are the alternatives or equivalents that can be provided for people to discourage the use of pangolin scales?
Well, I don't think we can actually give them alternatives, because in the real sense, the pangolin scales, you know, serve no basic, function. It is keratin, it's like your fingernails. You understand? So it serves we just really have to tell these people to stop. They need to stop. There's no alternative we can provide for pangolin skills. They just really have to stop trading this thing because it serves no purpose. It serves, scientifically, it has been established that it serves no purpose. So why are people still trading it? For selfish interest, I guess. So people really have to stop. So we shouldn't talk about alternative for the scales. We should talk about alternatives for, just looking away from it entirely. Looking away from hunting pangolins entirely.
What education is provided around conservation and where is it aimed? Example, is it aimed to the local population or governmental?
I think it cuts across all levels. It cuts across all levels.
So you are having lectures on conservation?
Yes, certainly.
Like something we are having today here. Do
yes,
you have it around? Like what population have you done something like this with?
Okay. Well, it is always very good to catch them young. When you tell younger ones about certain topics, they have this effect on the elderly ones because when our kids goes to school and they come back, we always want to hear from them what they've learned in school, and so when they come around and they tell us, oh, so person told us about these animals, and Daddy, I think you should stop doing this. I think you should stop doing that. We pay attention to them more. So this is what we do. We start with the elementary schools. We talk to them about conservation education. They need to embrace conservation of wildlife. They need to love wildlife, and from there, you can graduate to the level of telling the adult, because it's always very difficult to convince an adult, to stop an habit. You can always tell a child and a child will listen very easily. So we've been going to schools. I've done a couple of outreach programs, a couple of conservation education programs in schools, and we are receiving wonderful good feedback from places we visited.
Thank you. So from somebody says, thanks for this great presentation. From your presentation, it appears Vietnam is a culprit in pangolins consumption or usage. Meanwhile, I found that pangolins are protected in Vietnam and selling them is illegal. Then how do we justify this scenario?
Well, it's a black market thing, even in Nigeria, you are not even expected to walk around with, some specimens of wildlife, but people still trade in it, So it's a black market thing. So the loss of the land prohibits, the sales and, the consumption of those animals. But then you still have some unscrupulous individuals still going through the back door to do all these things. It's just like drugs, narcotics. For the fact that the laws of the land prohibited, we still have people still indulging in the act. So I think this is the area where enforcement needs to be intensified. You understand? We really have to work hand in hand with the security agencies, all the security agencies available over there in the country where it's happening, and most especially here in Nigeria. I want a situation whereby customs will be able to foster effort with Nigerian police force and immigration, and so that we can be able to track this issue out once and for all.
Thank you very much. Another question says, and from a completely different angle, if we assume that tradomedicine and bushmeat will continue, how suitable is the pangolin for semi-intensive farming?
This is, well, I really appreciate that. Well, it boils down to research. Before you can actually start, farming of a particular animal, which sometimes we call domestication in wildlife management. You must have, gone through a whole lot of research to ascertain what needed, you understand, to suffice what you are actually looking into. For instance, just like I said, the feeding habit is most very important when it comes to domesticating an animal or probably captive breeding an animal. You look into the resources that can actually facilitate the growth, the survival of that animal. You look into the what's it called, the what needed to be put in place to be able to give it a befitting environment to stay. You understand? You look at what can actually guarantee, reproduction on sustainable level. You understand? So we need to launch research into these areas. And by the time we are able to achieve or record meaningful, results from this research work, then we are sure that at the end of the day, if we put it to trial, it will work. But I tell you, I've seen situations whereby pangolins that are destined for death, pangolins that are actually rescued from the hands of hunters, barely dead at the wet market, were revived. You understand? And over time, they are being rehabilitated, and they yielded to, to treatment. They yielded to feeding, away from hunt and termite. We have people formulating. We have veterinarians formulating, feeds for these animals, and they are adjusting properly. So I think it's just a matter of time. The researchers are working, and with time, we'll get it right.
Thank you. And a question like it, this person is asking, can you advise us to rear pangolin, just like grass cutter farming?
I wouldn't advise you to do that now. I wouldn't advise you to do that now until the researchers, researchers involved in this conservation, researchers involved in the pangolin, ecology are able to come out with a clear fact on how to successfully go about these things. So I wouldn't want you to go into the wild or probably go into the wet market because you found a pangolin being traded or on the verge of being traded. You take it and you start. No, I wouldn't advise that. What you should do when you have a situations like that, contact the pangolin working group. They have a well-sophisticated working group in Nigeria that can take care of the animals and see whatever it is they can do to actually help the animal survive wherever they find befitting for such purpose.
Thank you. From another person, says James Bookie, it is interesting that you mentioned that no surveys of pangolins have been done in the most part of protected areas in the West, like Old UNP, Omo FR, etc. I think I differ from this opinion because I know I have read some articles on pangolin population in some of these locations. I'm of the opinion that you dig deeper, consult some experts like Chad Emogo working on pangolins in Cross River. Okay, thank you.
Well, I tell it to you that most of these works are actually based on indirect indices. When I say there are no research done, they are based on indirect indices. No one has been able to go into the wild. I met Charles Emogo, and I really appreciate what he's doing. He's been able to be able. I think he started with it, and he came out with some wonderful publications. But then we are just talking about one out of what should be many. You understand? Most of those research you are talking about at Odo National Park are based on indirect indices, and that doesn't actually suffice. If you are still talking about how we want to go about the conservation of pangolins in Nigeria, we really need sophisticated research, and that's the more reason why I donated those equipment. When you have camera traps, you will be able to monitor. You understand the activities of these animals. You can't just go into the market or probably go by looking at fecal samplings, and those are becoming obsolete. We really have to be contemporary in our way of conducting research. So when I say research has not been done widely, that's what I meant.
Thank you. I'm going to take these two questions together. I think you have answered the second question partially, but I'll still take it. The first one is, are pangolins nocturnal animals? And that since they are shy, do you think they will reproduce in captivity?
Well, they are nocturnal. They are nocturnal. Most of the times, if you really want to get to see pangolins, your survey should be done in the night, with your headlight, your flashlight, and that's the most preferred time to see some of these species. They're nocturnal. And but then that doesn't stop you. That doesn't stop you from actually, coming in contact with them in the daytime also. Most of the times, they are mostly nocturnal. And the second question you made mention of.
Will they reproduce in captivity?
Oh, well, it's still under maybe, but then I tell you, I've witnessed pangolins that actually reproduce in captivity. It might be due to probably forced births. Animals was rescued from the wet market and, in a couple of days while undergoing rehabilitation. It reproduced. So we've seen it, but then it's just one out of what should be many, like I always say.
Thank you very much. I think those are all the questions I have here. It's been an interesting period.
Okay.
Okay, so Dr. Ijose is asking, if you have one thing to do about this issue of pangolins conservation, what will it be?
We need to work with our legislature. We need to push the bill. We can generalize pangolin under, a general law, prohibiting the hunting or the persecution of pangolins in Nigeria. We have to specifically, address issue pertaining to pangolins since they are species of our interest. So if we can work, if all stakeholders can work hand in hand and come out with, ways to, sit with our legislature and see how we can sell the bill, to prohibit, the handling, the killing, the trading, and whatever it is in context to pangolin in Nigeria. I think that will go along with the suffice. We need a strict, way to go about this issue. Just mere conservation education might not suffice. It might take us a long time. So at that time, we start punishing people. When you have conservation police in the wet market arresting people, jailing people, I think people will see it right. And it's common about us. It's typical about us in Africa. We are so, I wouldn't want to use the word arrogant, but it's until when we see someone being punished, everybody starts sitting right. So that's that.
Thank you very much. Another question here, since they are shy animals, how do they express pain? And Dr. Duro Sharo is saying that not only legislation, enforcement is important. So Mama Hen will want to know how they express pain.
Well, they are not human. So I think the only way you can actually know if these animals are undergoing pain is probably when they make sound. You can tell if something is actually wrong with an animal from the sound they make. But from the emotions, you may not know. And then from their reaction, it's actually a very cryptic animal, very cryptic. So they are not that predictable. They are not that predictable. But I think from the sound, from the noise they make, you can as well tell that this animal is under serious problem, undergoing serious problem.
Thank you very much. It has been an interesting period.
Yeah.
And somebody is saying, so it seems behavioral observations are important. Cool.
Very, very.
So thank you very much. Sincerely, it's been interesting.
Thank you.
And knowing about pangolins, at least now I know there are some people working on conserving it, and I'm sure a lot of us, we are just really getting to know about it. Thank you very much. You can see that there is still a lot of work to do, especially for animal welfare. Animal welfare people. So I'm sure scientists are listening and they are looking at how we can fill in this gap in pangolin research for animal welfare. So I want to hand over back to the coordinator, Mother N, Dr. Ijose. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Of course, I can talk from today to tomorrow about chickens, but this one, I don't really know anything. But thank you for educating us today, Mr. Opemipo, and it has been an insightful presentation. Today is my first time also listening to pangolins and what they are. And I'm really, really excited about what you do. And of course, like she said, like the moderator said, there's a whole lot of work that is yet to be done as regarding this animal species. And I hope the wildlife people in our midst would take this issue serious, and let's see how far or how much we can do to help conserve these animals that we have. Yeah, you talked about we need to commend the effort of researchers and NGOs because of the little research or the work that they have been doing concerning pangolins. Yes, I thank you for that, for appreciating the work of researchers. It's not an easy thing. And at times, even you do research with little or low funds, or even from your own personal, based on the passion that you have for that animal. And yeah, that is what it is like. So thank you so much, Mr. Opemipo. And we appreciate all the participants for the questions. It shows that you really found it worthwhile and also interesting. And yeah, we come to the end.